This is our,
Got it. So.
Okay, I'll give everyone one more minute, so we'll officially start at 10:30.
Yeah. Hello, Sean.
How are you?
It's Al. How you doing?
I know that beard anywhere.
Yeah, it's not a very good beer, so it's memorable.
How's your summer?
Fantastic, really good.
Very good.
How about you?
That's that I'm fine. I'm very well. I was just noticing your shirt. I woke up this morning and I said, I wonder what color shirt Al's going to wear. And I had this sort of dun color, so I went and got one out, and I'm wearing one too.
Good. So I met your expectations.
We're brain channeling here.
Okay, I think everyone is here. And Joyce, do you want to say a couple words?
okay. Thank you all for joining us today. And to my Santa Barbara buddies, I'm actually in St. Charles, Illinois. And I have about 8 friends joining us today. We're a group that get together once a year for an art project, and we're staying at Al's place, and he's a friend of Sean's. So that's how this all came about. And you're going to be blown away by this presentation today. And Sean, thank you so much. So I'm going to turn it over to Eugene and Sean.
Totally welcome. I'm delighted to be here, to be with you. I understand you're mostly painters and sculptors, and mostly abstractionists. Is that a word? Is that some
Yep.
Oh, good. Well, that's what photographers refer to people like you as real artists.
Thank you.
We sort of snuck in the back door of the arts, and don't necessarily feel entirely welcome. But it's been I look much more at other media than photography these days. So somebody's got their sound on.
Yeah, somebody's got their sound on. Let's see.
Ask people to mute and then.
Yep, mute. Everybody, please mute.
There we go.
Oh, not you, Sean.
I'm back. Okay.
There we go. Yeah.
Here's what I thought I'd do today, and I've been investigating some stuff in the last few years that has sort of taken me back to my very beginnings in photography. You know, when you begin anything, you don't know what you're doing, and it's very exciting, and then you invest years and years and years in getting to know exactly what you're doing and getting things to come out exactly the way you want to. And I thought of this simile. It's like finding a horse in a clearing, a white horse that is gently grazing, and you approach it and you touch it, and it lets you touch it, and you think, I wonder if it would let me ride it, if it would let me even get on it. So you get on it, and it does let you get on, but then it starts to move, it starts to walk and trot, and then it starts to run, and it runs away, and it runs and runs and runs, and over years it takes you to places that you never even knew were there. And then after a while you say, this is my horse, I have to tame this horse, I have to get it to do what I want it to do. And you spend a lot of time taming the horse, and pretty soon the horse will roll over or stand up on its hind legs or do anything else you want it to do. And then you try to go riding around with it, and it only will go where you want to go and where you know. And you realize at a certain point, I have to teach this horse to run away again. So that's what I've been really working on in photography and other media. And I want to share some of that with you. I thought I'd start by showing you a quick trip through my, whatever it is, 40 years of photography. And then I'm going to show you a couple of projects that are about the same thing, one of which is still, one of which is film. And we'll look at that, and then we'll leave some time for questions at the end, or comments or statements or anything else. So let's see, I'm going to screen share. Well, and do this. And okay, so this is my beginnings. And I should say I studied, I thought I was going to work, I thought I was going to be a writer. I thought I was going to write for the New Yorker. I was going to graduate from college, and I would go to New York, and they would recognize my brilliance and give me a job writing these smart, cute little stories about, with a superior attitude toward everything. Garrison Keillor said this wonderful thing once. He said, I was 25 years old. I was living in New York. I was writing for the New Yorker, although they didn't know it at the time. And that was going to be my job. But I deflected into theater right after college, and I worked very steadily for 2 solid years, day and night, 6 and 7 days a week, at a new regional theater in New Haven called the Long Wharf Theater. Fantastic experience, wonderful experience. But it burned me out. I left. I went off to Europe for 4 or 5 months, taking the trip that I'd been going to take after college, and came back. And because I was going to Europe and taking a trip, I thought, somebody said, we have to take a camera. And so for no better reason than that, I went out and bought a camera, which turned out to be pretty faithful. And when I came back, the theater that I had worked for called me up and asked me if I could take some pictures for them, rehearsal pictures. I said, sure. So I started doing that. Again, it wasn't a job. It was just something to do while I was trying to figure out what to do. And then the Yale Repertory Theater, which had just started, they called me and asked me to do it. And there I met a playwright by the name of Jules Pfeiffer, who playwright, cartoonist, and I was photographing a play that he was doing, and I asked him, I had seen a play of his called Little Murders in London, and it had opened and closed in about 2 days in New York. And I said, why did that close in New York? It's wonderful, it's funny. He said, well, we shouldn't have done it on Broadway, and in fact, we're doing it off Broadway, and it should go much better. So I went to a magazine, which many of you will remember, called Look. And it was just a terrific magazine to work with and to work for, and they did interesting stories. And I lied and said that Jules Pfeiffer was my great pal, and they were opening this play, and it was very funny. And they said, if it opens, if it's a hit, you can do a story on Jules Pfeiffer. So it opened, and it was a hit. So 9 months after buying my first camera, and with no intention, I had my first story in Look magazine. I thought, well, this is easy. This is easy. I'll just do this. It has never been easy since then, let me tell you. But it has always been fun. So anyway, moving right along, this is me in Dublin, having left the theater. And I just so identified with this kid because my attitude toward the world was pretty much the same as his. And at the time, serious work was always black and white. I'm sure you can remember. There's not much color involved. I used to drive around here in Connecticut and other places, Pennsylvania and so forth, looking to see if Walker Evans had missed anything. So I would seek out these Evansy kind of places and take pictures. He didn't miss anything, by the way. Magazines were how you could make a living then. And I was in Northern Ireland for this, sort of looking for trouble, which for photographers, maybe more than other people, is always a good place to look, where something's going wrong or falling apart. This is tear gas. Every afternoon, about 4 o'clock, they'd have what they call the matinee, which is they would come out and throw stones at the British, and the British would shoot tear gas back at them And then everybody would go home for tea at 5 o'clock. Some years after starting up, and by the way, the magazines went out of business shortly after I started beating on their doors. So I worked for Life and I worked for Look, but they both disappeared. And so I started doing advertising. I started doing commercial photography. But I always knew that I had not gone into this to have a job, but to find things out. So I always kept my own projects going. This was one that was really a big turnaround for me. I got unfettered access to West Virginia and Alabama maximum security prisons, and made about 5 or 6 trips to these places. And it was another world, and photography has always been a means to go into other worlds, places that are unfamiliar. Oops, I did a little too quickly on that one. Okay. That is a knife that has been made from a ruler. You can see the inch marks on the blade. Some scars that a knife like that will make. This was the scariest man I saw there. I did not spend my nights in the prison. Some years back, I was cleaning up my studio, and I had this old book around and these stones, and as a way of not cleaning up the studio, I just started moving things around together, and it led to this project, which went on for 4 or 5 years. It's called The Secret Books. It came out as a book with a text by Jorge Luis Borges, the great Argentine writer, text about books, the book of sand that you could never open to the same page twice. And this is all just pre-Photoshop. So I sort of had to figure out how to do everything in front of the camera. And it was, great to have a project to just, whenever you had an idea, you could go back to it. And it kept boiling while you were doing other things or walking around in the world. I did a lot of portraiture. And I'm actually shy. I'm okay on Zoom, but if I were to walk up to one of you, I would have a hard time walking up and asking anybody if I could photograph them. She is from Russia, from Siberia, and really this picture makes me want to go to Russia and photograph. It's just some of the most intensely wonderful, interesting people. This is by a man named Hermenegildo Bustos, Mexican painter, an Indian man who lived in the town of, well, it's now called after him, Purísima de Bustos, which is near, Purísima, I forget the name of it. It's near Guanajuato. And he painted these, his villager friends with extraordinary insight and penetration. And I saw some of this work in Mexico, and I went out after visiting a museum and sat around the square having a drink and realizing that all the people were still around, their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren. So I went and set up a studio in Guanajuato and San Miguel de Allende and Purísima de Bustos, and had a fast-talking Spanish Mexican assistant who I would go up to people on the street. I would bring them back to this studio. These are all done with a view camera, which those of you who know photography know that it's a very ungainly machine. And that's why I use it, because it would really, really slow me down, slow the whole process down. At one point, somebody moved in a shot, so I got half a face, and I thought, oh, that's too bad. And then I thought, wait, I'll just get the other half. So that kind of opened something up. At first, I made them look as close to each other as possible, but then when they got different is when they got more interesting. And while I was doing that, I was thinking, hey, this would be fun to do in Havana. So I weaseled my way into Havana and did set up a little studio in old Havana and brought people in. This is a singer. And I saw her there a couple of years ago. She was well into her 80s. She looks exactly the same. She's so elegant and beautiful. And while I was there, I thought this would be fun to do in Rome. So I headed off to Rome, and I knew we would never get people to go to a studio in Rome. So we had a yard of black velvet to hang behind them, and a yard of black velvet to hang around their neck, and a fast-talking Italian assistant who would convince people to do this. And we would just stop people. There was no lighting in this case. I love this guy. You can just, he's probably, what, 14? You can just see him practicing that thing with his eyes in the mirror in the morning. This is a Southern Sudanese refugee in Cairo, where I spent some time. Any more of them? No. This is a guy who was actually in my very first photography class. I love this picture. He was the most beautiful young Italian American kid you've ever seen, and he looked at this and he went, "Oh," and I know what he means because I do the same thing when I look in the mirror. But there's something almost saintly, and not good saintly. It's a sainthood that's been earned, you know, in his face. This was a man named Sal Scalora, who was a museum curator here in Connecticut, who insisted on smiling except for one frame. And this is who he was. This is an old picture. This is a picture I saw in my sleep. I woke up and took it. We were making a film in Austria about refugees from Eastern Europe. This was a little Polish child and his father. A few years ago, number of years ago, I was complaining that I wanted to go to Africa, but I didn't feel like it was a place where you just go and turn up. And the person I was talking to, a man named Thatcher Cook, said, "I'm taking a class to Africa. If you want to tag along, you can come along." So I got there, and once I was there, I still had no idea what I was going to do. He said, "There's this little boxing club on the other side of town. Why don't you just drop in there? See what you find, see if you like anything." And I was absolutely down a rabbit hole. Again, it was going into another universe, and they were just completely unlike me, and that's what was so interesting about them. The light was unbelievable, unbelievable. The other great thing about this whole group is that I couldn't plot things, and I sort of get tired of my own pictures sometime in that they are too perfect, you know, too perfectly composed, and I couldn't do it there. I could barely hold on, and I would get things like this, something I would never do normally. It was fascinating. That's the incredible lights, the late afternoon. They're no longer in this gym, unfortunately. I wouldn't even go back now. It would be too disappointing. This is a weigh-in. And that's somebody in the ring. I think that there's an old warrior culture in Africa that they're much closer to than we are. And I wondered if this isn't kind of a move in that direction, especially when I saw this guy. I've also been doing work with the Crow Indians, and I think a lot of them go into the service too, but to fulfill that warrior ideal. That's the coach on the left. Okay, so that's kind of a real quick tour. Let me just read you something that I came across the other day. This is in a book called Photo No-Nos by a man named Jason Fulford. It's all the things you shouldn't do, an entire book of it. And this is a few words by a man named Roger Ballin. If you've not seen his work, it's very strange. It's very dark. He's South African. I don't know how to describe it, and here's why. In the 5 decades that I have been an artist / photographer, my goal in producing imagery has ultimately been to create works that are uncanny and virtually indescribable with words. And that absolutely hit something for me, something that I sort of need to try to do. Photographers are very big at looking at something and saying, what is it? Where is it? What's the story here? And a lot of photographers think of themselves as storytellers, but I wanted to try and make some work that is about a place that doesn't tell you anything, stories. It just, you have to get it just by looking. So this is, I'm going to run through this series, and then I'll show you a film version of the same kind of thing. Okay. Oh no, this isn't the beginning of that. But it's still, everything I said is still true. So these are things that don't, I hope, mean anything more than music means a particular thing. Now, I don't know if this belongs in here or not. This was just the other night in a dugout at a baseball game up in Massachusetts, Brockton, Massachusetts. And I looked at that lighting and I thought, my God, look at that. That's just incredible. I have a movie cameraman friend that I'm going to send it to. And I'm going to say, how would you do this? What I love is pictures you can't think your way to. And Gene, I know you were a commercial photographer in New York. You plot everything in advance. What could go wrong?
Yeah.
Fix it in advance. Make sure there's no surprises. And if you have a better idea, you keep your mouth shut because they don't want it.
Right.
And that's a habit I certainly have gotten into. And that I'm trying to break. And as funny as much giggly as people get over white on white paintings, that's what's his name? California guy, the guy who did the garden at the Getty. That's not him. That's his painting. Lisette Modell used to, she was the great teacher. She was Deanne Arbus' teacher, and she was the great teacher in New York. She had a great assignment she would give to people who, she would send them off to the Metropolitan Museum of Art to photograph because people are preoccupied and they're doing something intense. And it is a wonderful thing to watch. coming back from the bathroom in Istanbul. You probably recognize that already. I did this on a walk on my iPhone, and I've gone back in the similar weather to try and do it with a quote real camera unquote. It's never gotten better. Not even as good. Al, that is the Olson house up in.
Yeah, yeah.
When I was doing this, a pickup pulled up, and an old guy gets out. He's 90. He says, "I'm 95 years old, and I was born in that house right there, and I go out lobstering every day. I still do it." It was, God, he was wonderful.
Sean, you talk about commercial photography and all the planning that goes into a photo, et cetera, et cetera. One of the annoying things that I found of doing commercial photography was all the distraction behind you, all the team, the people, the
Yeah.
assistants, the whatever. I'm guessing that you prefer alone,
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
right?
Yeah, when I would have a day, I say I'm going to go out and just shoot something for myself. My video manager would say, "Do you need a stylist?"
No, I need light.
Somebody to place the birds. That's all. That's inside the Olson house. See, here I am. I'm being such a photographer. That's in Darjeeling. That's in a Tibetan monastery in Darjeeling. That's not what you need to know. I do like this. This reminds me of Giorgio Morandi's paintings, and where he'd take all those bottles and he sort of clumped them together, and they made this other thing as they aggregated. We were out hunting a buffalo on the Crow Reservation. This was a quiet moment. Okay, so this one's I'm going to try and keep my mouth shut for this whole thing, and I'm going to go through these pictures, and then at the end I'll show you a little bit of video. Okay. Now, I'm going to not say anything about that, but I'm going to show you the tail end of a film that I made. And you'll learn a little bit of the backstory of this house. The film, I'm going to show you about 6 minutes. The film's about 25 long. It's on my website if anybody's really vastly curious about that film. You can go see it. But first I have to find it. Hold the phone. Oh, my hard drives are just waking up. It's going to take 1 second. Okay, I'm going to screen share again. I'm going to put this up. I hope the sound comes through. Sometimes Zoom does funny things with sound, and there's a beautiful Arvo Part score on this. So you can see? Everybody can see?
Yep.
Okay.
This is what I was looking for. Hey, Sean, can you pause it and then try to adjust the volume because of the music is not coming through?
No, it's very quiet here. That's just wind sound. You'll hear when it gets real. I'm going to let the credits play because the shot is so beautiful and so is the music. It's only a minute. Okay. So, somebody chatted something? Robert Ryman, no. The first part is by Arvo Part, the first music, Arvo Part. It's called Mirror in Mirror, which sounds like a Dwayne Michaels photograph. Maybe one of mine. Maybe I'll try that someday. The last part is Francois Couperin's The Mysterious Barricades. And nobody knows to this day what he was talking about, what the barricades were, what was mysterious about them. So the in both of those instances, first working on the film, I would go back. It was the perfect COVID project because there was nobody there. It was just me in that big house. And I went back at different seasons. But I had no idea what I was doing. How is this going to go together? How is this going to happen? And I mentioned earlier on a sculptor by the name of Daryl Pettit, or Petit, he says. What does he say? No, he says Pettit because although French Canadian, he's now living down here, and it's just too much to explain to people. Anyway, he when he was in college, he had an accident, got hit in the head, right here, left hemisphere. He had been studying city planning to that point, and he became an artist. I think he was knocked out of his left hemisphere into his right hemisphere, because that was the one that worked from then on. And he's a good friend of mine, and I've done a book of him, and I've been revising that book and talking with him. And he said this interesting thing. He said, when I don't know what's happening when I'm working. I'm looking for a piece of stone that looks back at me. And he makes these 60 and 70 ton granite sculptures in the quarry just right up the street here. And he said, when I don't know what's happening, that's when I know something is happening. That's when I know I'm getting someplace. And he has no choice. I mean, he's stuck in his right hemisphere for the most part. I'm stuck in my left hemisphere for the most part, like most of us. And so how does a painter know when something is starting to happen? Do you start with an idea? Maybe, but if it doesn't get better, if you don't transcend your idea, what's the point? And that's how I felt in the middle of both of those projects. And the first one, really only when I got the winter footage did I say, okay, this is about what it feels like to be there. And then I was able to edit the rest of it. When I got done with that, I said, what is different about filming? Because I'm new to it. What is different about filming than doing stills? And the only way to find out really was to go back and do stills, which I did do. This is my COVID part 2. And once again, first of all, I tried all the things that have been gorgeous in the film. Not one of them worked as a still, not one. And so I had to just let go and be once again and embrace not knowing. And that's when it pulled together in some ways. Roger Ballin says that is not verbal. You can't think your way to it, and you can't describe it, but you get there. There was Yale University near me had a series of talks, and Richard Serra was one of the speakers, and because he went to the art school, and of course the audience was full of young art students who wanted to see this. And the great thing was that he took questions, which not all of them do. And so one kid raised his hand and he said, what do you do when you're just so caught up in insecurity? How do you get around it so you can do your work? And Sarah's ferocious. He said, you don't get around it. You start there. If you're not insecure about your work, it's because you haven't started it yet. And, everybody's ears were pinned back like that. But, how much, I don't know about you guys, but I know, Eugene, that you were working toward comfort a good deal of the time and eliminating discomfort before anybody even showed up. And I know that, and it becomes a habit. So just diving off the end of the diving board in the dark is kind of counterintuitive, but that's how you wind up in the pool, and you hope there's water in there. So that's the thing that I've really been trying to recultivate. And there's this wonderful Tibetan saying is one should have the attitude of a small child in a temple.
Mm.
And you're just, there it is. If you can imagine in the room that you're in now, and the president is going to speak there in an hour, and a Secret Service agent walks in, and he looks around and he says, where are the doors? Where are the windows? Where could somebody get into this place? What can we control here? An interior decorator would walk in and say, this place needs some paint and maybe a sofa over there and some throw pillows. But a 2-year-old will walk in, he won't say anything. He'll just see the whole room as it is and not comment on it. So that's when the wonderful things sprout, and you try not to kill them with critical thinking. It's just not part of the thing. And it's harder photographers always have to go out and find something. You got to find something to point your camera at. A painter can look at a blank canvas, or a musician can noodle around and two notes somehow go together and then something gets going. But photographers mostly have to, and I suppose there are exceptions to that. But so anyway, that's why I'm happy to talk to painters, and always feel a little bit as though I'm cheating by having subject matter all around me. But so listen, if I've been nattering on, perhaps, I hope not too much, but if anybody has questions, I would love to, or if anybody has answers, that would be even better. So,
Sean, I had a comment about what you just said. How do you get out of those comforts? That I think you're doing that now by trying something completely different. Well, not completely different, but a new technology with the film, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and that's what I did is I tried something completely different with sculpture. And I was going to ask you about the film. How how are you adapting to the technology? You know, the editing. I'm sure it's a whole new slew of things that you're learning.
It is, and it isn't in a way. Um, um, First of all, if you've ever had a group of a show and you've had 20 pieces and you say, okay, where do they go? And you start sequencing, as you know, like good old Minor White would do, and saying this echoes this. It's not subject, but there's a reverberation there, and then maybe there's some space here, and maybe we need a blast of 3 here, and then nothing, and then 2. It's not unlike that. It's not. It's probably, and anybody who's ever dealt with music should probably learn it quite quickly. Um, the software is deep, very deep. Makes Photoshop look like Facebook, you know. But the best advice I got in the beginning was start with iMovie, which almost does everything for you. And when you need more, go to something else. But it's all still finding 2 things and putting them together. I did an online seminar with a guy named Tedeschi who has edited all of Scorsese's concert and musician films. And he said this wonderful thing. He said, I like to have people confused for a while. And you, because you worked in commercial photography, no ambiguity. No, we got to be clear, clear, clear. No. And so you start to embrace things like you embrace not knowing as doing the work, and then you give some of that experience to the audience so that they don't know too, and then it resolves. You know. So I've been doing it for 10 years, and they get more and more accomplished. They're different. I did a project that isn't quite done yet for the last 10 years on the Crow Reservation in Montana. I was supposed to film a Sundance there, which would have been amazing last summer and this summer, but they didn't happen. But the film as it is going to be screened on the reservation in October, which I'm so excited about. And on the other hand, I'm so afraid that somebody's going to get up and say, who the hell is this guy to come out here and tell us what the Crow Reservation's about? You know, but they were all very welcoming to me, or at least tolerant of me. Somebody would always come up when I was filming something. Somebody would always come and say, "Who are you?" And I had an answer, fortunately. So, but each one has been like the boxing club. When you get there, it's action all the time. It's almost easy. I've started a little thing on this baseball team. Baseball, nothing happens in baseball. I'm thinking, what am I going to film? Nothing is happening. So this is going to be tricky. I don't know how this is going to go. And I don't care about baseball. I don't care about boxing. But what I care about are humans in these kind of tight, extreme situations. When I first arrived in Uganda, it was in 09, so just after the 08 election. And then these guys would come up to me and they said, so who's a heavyweight champ in the States now? And I thought for a moment, I said, Obama. And that was the right answer. I was home free with that. I'm sorry.
I have a comment, but go finish your thought.
No, that was a burp. That was not a thought.
Okay. This is Al, and I guess it's more of a comment than a question. I've watched that video that you shared with us at the end there probably at least 24 times, and every time I watch it, I enjoy it more. It's so incredible. And what I find so fascinating about it is it's like you've done this video work, but you haven't abandoned your still life, your still aesthetic. It's like the best of both worlds. And when you mentioned baseball, doing a project on baseball, I mean, for me, you may be not knowing what you're going to do, but for me, I mean, it hit me like a lead balloon. That'd be absolutely perfect to take that same aesthetic to baseball. Because baseball is so slow moving, I think the idea of using that same technique with baseball could be incredibly interesting.
That's, I'm hoping you're right, Al. I'm hoping. But what somebody once commented, you can always tell when a film has been made by a photographer. And at various times they've had shows or articles where they take these great cameramen and they say, and here are their stills. And they're usually not very interesting. And the thing is, what I've learned is what makes a shot happen in film is where it comes from and where it goes, and not just the stillness of it. Whereas a still has to have echoes in both directions, right there in the same frame. You can't resolve it by moving in a little bit or backing up a little bit. And I think it could be a trap for a still photographer to just make a bunch of beautiful stills, but put them on film. Gordon Willis was a great cameraman. He did a lot. He did 2 out of the 3 Godfathers. He did a lot of Woody Allen films, a lot of other beautiful films. Great cameraman. And I interviewed him once, and he said, "I know if somebody comes up and says, 'Great shot, Gordon,' I've failed. I don't want them to see the great shot. I want them to keep the web intact, you know." But I've got 1 million hours of footage and no clue, Al. So I'm right back to not knowing. And I'll hope you're right.
Oh, you've already started shooting it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I started about 3 weeks ago. It's a league that they're college kids and they play for 8 weeks in the summer, and they're scouted during that time. The majors have their eye on them.
So this is where that one shot came from that you just said, just in the dugout. Yeah.
And the guy whom I'm making this arrangement with, he says, we've got teams in Worcester, we've got teams in Westfield, and we've got teams in Brockton. He says, Brockton's rough. Brockton's kind of a rough town. The stadium's kind of a mess. And I said, Brockton. That's what I want.
The last thing you want is a brand new stadium, right?
Yeah. So any other thoughts or questions?
What are you shooting with when you're shooting these films? You ever tried with your iPhone?
Yeah. Next question. No. They're getting awfully good, iPhones, but there's a lot that they can't do. And so I don't know. Sometimes it's nice. I've done a lot of work with view cameras, and you have to engage with it that much more intensely. So yes.
Sean, I found your photographs and also the film like extremely emotional. I mean, especially, not even especially anything, but really, you know. So, and also, what was interesting was the singer.
Yes.
It's amazing because before you said she was a singer, you just know she's singing, you know. And I was thinking, like, what's the difference between like someone saying cat and singing cat? You know what I mean? Like, it's amazing how much you get from the person. Anyway, my question was the intense emotionality. Is that something you find, or is that something you're drawn to, or is that because I mean, you made me cry with the film. It was and even the still shots. I mean, like, is it something you're conscious of, or it just happens?
I first of all, I couldn't be happier to hear you say that. There's a thing about this subject of it. So that's my great grandfather's house, and my father adored the place. He just loved it. It was a huge part of his childhood. I didn't adore the place. I didn't really spend much time there. Didn't go up there. I really now I feel very attached to the place, but it was not like I was reconnecting with my roots. I was sort of reconnecting with the lack of those roots, or sort of going around my father, maybe. So, but it was, you know, if a parent loves something and thinks you should too, what are the chances you're going to love it? Pretty low, you know. So I haven't put anything in there, but I do. I have a certain what Yeats called the Celtic twilight, a certain Celtic melancholy that I am drawn to, and you can, interestingly, you can. I'll illustrate it this way. I'm going to recite a poem. It's called Silence by Gregory Orr. And it goes, the way the word sinks into the deep snow of the page. The deer lying dead in the clearing, its head and antlers transparent, the black seed in its brain parachuting toward earth. That is his evocation of a terrible incident in his childhood. And the paradox to me is that you can take this terrible incident, write something that so brings it forward and makes it come alive in very inspecific ways and say, yes, nailed it. You know, you can describe a tragedy, and when you do it, it's very positive. So that's, I've not put anything in, but I let it have me, especially in the editing phase. In the shooting phase, I'm walking around saying, oh, Jesus, where's a shot here? What's going to happen? Oh my God, is the light ever going to get, you know, and just all the insecurities in the world, not even that, but running around, not knowing what I'm doing. It's really in the editing that it started to get emotional. Do you know Jay Maisel?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
A tough old New York photographer, big bluff guy with an accent like this with a flight lift. I showed him, he saw the film, he left a message, he says, Sean, you made me cry. I wasn't trying. But there certainly are a lot of cues in there that got to me. I'm glad they got to you. I suppose you'd have to say that a lot of it was in you to begin with.
You know, like just the shot of the window with the snow. And then
Yeah.
first, I think, if it's not my imagination, first you were on the curtains and then you zoomed out through the window.
Yeah.
I don't know why that just made me, it just got to me.
Well, you're not the only one.
Yeah.
I've watched it 4 times and I cry every time.
Yeah. You know, and then when you see the chair thing and you
Mhm.
realize, and you know, and then you know, it was beautiful, really beautiful. And your still photography of the people are just amazing.
Let me tell you something funny. I was up at the house. There was a 4th of July party there starting in 1872. And last year was the only year we missed it.
Wow.
There was one this year. So I went up, and what I realized had happened is that my cousin Freddie was so scandalized by the torn curtains that he took them down.
Oh, no.
Yes, I was like, where'd you put them, Freddie? I may need those. I may need to make somebody cry. Where are they? Any other questions?
Oh, I would just like to add to that, the photo or the still of the curtain, the detail and the contrast, it just hit me so hard that it reminded me of Wyeth's best work and New England, sort of encapsulated in that photograph.
Yeah, yeah. I'll tell you something funny. We had access to the Olson house many years ago now. I was able to take a
Wow.
class there. And I said, good luck, guys. We're going to be able to go there and take pictures. And they all said, we don't want to do that. It's all going to look like Wyatt. I said, photograph space between things.
Mhm.
And it worked.
Yes.
Another
Yeah.
question.
Yes.
Like some of those shots, do you take like a bunch of shots and then you go through them and see which one is the most powerful, or do you have it all done before you click the camera?
Perfectly under my control all the time. All the
No
time.
way.
I know that something is going to be good, and I know that with software I can change things a little bit, but you can actually change things a lot. But because I learned photography shooting slide film that has no forgiveness, and you can't do anything afterward, I do it a little bit this way, a little bit that way, maybe, and then when I look at them, one of them usually sings more than the others.
Yeah.
Sometimes there'll be 12 shots with no difference at all.
Mm.
Hi. I just want to say, I also loved the shots you did in the art museum too. Those were
Oh, yeah.
so charming and delightful, and your work is so poetic. What I love most is it really kind of expresses this beauty, but it's so intangible. You're feeling it, but it's. I like that it's not like a specific type of. You can't quite put it in words. You can't. Yes.
That's what
Thank you. It's hard for me to even put that in words.
But that's what got me about photography in the first place. Is I would look at it and go, it was my image was that I would be there someplace and a man in a black cape would walk up and say, "May I borrow your camera?" and I was like, and who did that? And I'm sure you've all any artist has that experience at some point, and really you get one and that's it. You're sunk. You want another, and then you want another. So, but that is a thing that what we educate is critical thinking, knowing, plotting, analysis, and this doesn't get education, but it doesn't need it, fortunately.
It's
There's
beyond.
there's a wonderful guy named Ian McGilchrist who wrote a book called The Master and His Emissary about the relationship between the hemispheres, and the left hemisphere's job is to analyze what comes in from the right and make sense of it. But then going back the other way, you get that Paul Valéry statement: "Seeing is forgetting the name of the thing one sees."
Beautiful, beautiful.
The key going into a lot.
Perfect.
And painters know this. Artists know this. It's hard to convince